That sound marks the beginning of the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod. I am your host, Gary, and this is the podcast where I discuss what's going on in my life in collecting. Also, the only podcast where the host will freely admit he spent more time looking for a nice 1992 G.I. Joe Ford America than any sane human being possibly should. But it's also the podcast where I talk about a toy or playset, or in some cases a trailer, that goes with the G.I. Joe 3 3/4 and 4-inch toy line from 1982 to present. To start off this episode, start off with a couple things. Got some mail calls in the past couple weeks. Most notably, I got a 1993 wetsuit, the orange edition, complete. I had the previous, the 92, in yellow, but now I got the one in orange because you have the two, and it's kind of hard to build a collection if you don't have everything in the collection. But also the fact that while I've been playing with my flag playset here and there and changing things up, because the change in colors, it'll look different. It'll add more people to the crew. Even though you know it's the same character, it's more like building a diving crew. And I really like all of Wetsuit's iterations. I don't think there's a bad figure really amongst them. So it fills out the deck of the flag. And you put the helmet on, and who knows who's underneath the helmet. Also, I managed to score some HasLab figures. I bought another Mickey Mouse Cobra Commander because when I took mine out of the package, I kind of stressed the arm. And even though I'm the only guy that'll know about it, it does have a slight stress mark on the elbow. So I bought another one so I can have one to open up that doesn't have the stress mark. Then I also got another Ramp Rat because Ramp Rats are army builders. And I don't care what you say, I think he's delightful. And he is my happy find from the HasLab. I do like the other figures as well. I'm going to say that the Night Force Ripcord is also a treat. But, the Ramp Rat just sparks joy in my collection, and I wanted to have another one. He works really good with the Conquest of Cobra Mountain from Spy Troops line. And, with the Rattler, it's good to have a crew. And even the mortars that they come with, in my imagination, that's a way they secure the airfield or they capture the airfield so that the Rattlers or the Night Ravens or the Fang 2s can land there. So another thing to add to the collection. But finally, on Facebook in Mercari, there was a gentleman listing a Larry Hama sketch of Baroness. And it's a nice bust of, pardon the pun, of Baroness. It's not a full body shot. It's, waist up. And she's holding a pistol with an extended capacity magazine. It's actually a drum. It just looks nice. It's a nice profile of her. And I'll post that on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter for the social media. And I'll even post a contrast from the last time I got Baroness from Larry Hama. It was in 2017 at JoeCon. I asked for that because I like the fact that Baroness is a Larry Hama and Herb Trimpe creation, not a Hasbro creation. So I really enjoy the fact that it was something that Larry Hama brought to the G.I. Joe mythos that Hasbro adopted. The other reason why I sought out another Baroness sketch was because the fact that mine from 2017 got damaged when I had it shipped to Connecticut from Florida, and I naively packaged it, and all the sketches and prints and everything that was in that package got creased. Some were permanently creased, like my Baroness sketch, and others fared better, but because of that, I wanted to get another one. And also, I hate saying it, I kind of like this one. This one was from Lexington Comic-Con. I did not attend. I think I paid a fair price for it. I found out from Greg Engel of Anything Joe's that it was quite a markup, but I still felt I didn't pay much more than what I paid at Terrificon.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
That's a little bit about what I got. I've been slowly trying not to go overboard. And another thing I want to point out that I did get recently, actually I forgot to mention it on the previous Missal, was I also managed to score some gold bordered Impel trading cards from 1991. Now, a lot of collectors are familiar with the Impel 200 card trading card set from the packs, but also if you stopped collecting in the 90s and you're coming in, Impel produced 20 additional cards with gold borders that were included with the action figures in 1991. So these gold bordered cards can fetch or command a higher price point because they're a much smaller run and they're not as known. So once you find out, these cards individually can command anywhere from $20 to $50 if you are just looking to spend money. But I happened across a guy on Mercari who was selling a whole bunch of G.I. Joe Impel cards in like different lots. And in one lot, he had 2 gold bordered cards. And even though they weren't in mint condition, and really none of the cards that I've gotten out of a G.I. Joe package have been truly mint. But for $7 to get 2 of them, to add them to my Ultra Pro pages in my binder, not the official binder, but a binder that I have for these, it was nice. It brings now I'm like about 5 cards out of 20, and I'm slowly piecing the collection together. It's not something I'm got to finish, but that might change at 19 cards or something.
It is too dangerous, Commander. There could be dire consequences.
The main reason for the podcast this time around on Missal number 44 is the Cobra Buzz Boar from 1987. Now, what's drawn me to the Buzz Boar is its circular saw-like appearance. And for whatever reason, seeing it in the G.I. Joe Berg video where Cobra Commander has it piloted by a Cobra Bat and it runs down a Cobra officer in their Renegades play motion, it heightened the toy into the fact that it was like, here is a new play pattern for the Buzz Boar. Now, this is not a toy I had as a child. It is not something I really had a lot of experience with, except for the one that I've had in my collection for several years now. Obviously, I go down into the basement, go through my collection, I find the Buzz Boar, and then I discover what's wrong with mine, and just collaborations and listening and overall just experiencing it. Now I want to share that. The first thing about the Cobra Buzz Boar is it's boar as in the pig, B-O-A-R, not Buzz Boar as in like a boring device, B-O-R-E. To me, that signifies that this is an offensive weapon rather than a support vehicle for the Cobra forces. And as always, any G.I. Joe vehicle, large or small, always has a weapon or 2 on it. Obviously, to one side, you have 2 missiles, and on the other side, you have 2 guns, providing ample firepower for this small toy. The Buzz Boar was designed by Guy Cassidy, and there is some creator commentary on 3D Joe's on their page. The funny thing I see about the marketing on the box for the Buzz Boar is it shows the Cobra Viper holding the door open as it bores across the landscape. And it shows the spinning blades digging in to the ground while the guns fire and the missiles launch. It's funny to me because they're showing the Viper inside holding the door open because when the door closes, it's hard to see that character. And that is true of the toy itself. Also, one thing is that this does remind me of the Masters of the Universe Roton. In that case, the blade spun around the central axis like an equator of the Earth, whereas the Buzz Boar's is rotating longitudinally like a circular saw cutting through wood. Looking at the back of the box and the marketing towards that, I love it when they include this blurb. Super realistic detail. It's as realistic as a manned circular saw can be. And, they sell you or the parent on sturdy construction for rugged play. And I'll mention on that, there is a reason why I had to buy a second Buzz Boar. And it does involve rugged play, apparently. You have 2 removable missiles. The door pivots open for Cobra access. Well, why Cobra? Why not a Dreadnought? Heck, why not even a G.I. Joe who captures it? And then you have, of course, the spinning cutting wheel. Now, this is a 1 flag point toy, so that puts it price-wise on par with an action figure. So we have a value toy here for your Cobra forces, and it's from my fast becoming one of my favorite G.I. Joe years to discover, 1987. The Cobra Buzz Boar is made up of several pieces, not too many, but essentially it is a silver clamshell where the 2 pieces snap together, and that clamshell captures the spinning wheel borer, which on the blueprints is spelled B-O-R-E-R, and the seat. The seat snaps into one of the posts, you put the wheel borer on, and then you slap the other half of the silver body on, followed by the door, the Cobra emblem, and the missiles, and then you flip it over one more time for throwing on the dual 50 caliber machine gun. And with 6 stickers, you get all the detail you need. It's simple, but because of its design, I think the simplicity works in this toy's favor. The toy, especially the silver parts, have plenty of details molded in it. You have like little hydraulic cylinders on the bottom skids. You have a molded in hose on the side of the 50 caliber machine guns. You have 2 vents, which we'll get into, but they're listed on the blueprints as, exhaust vents. And you even have this nice little grate that you can see by the 50 caliber machine gun. But when you flip it over and you open up the door, you see the other side of the grate on the interior of the Buzz Boar. The only thing I could say to potentially enhance that detail would be to literally cut slots for the grate on that side. However, with the exhaust on that side, I don't think Cobra Commander wants his forces, or even Serpentor, dying of carbon monoxide poisoning on the battlefield. Because everybody's just going to get sleepy and then not wake up. On the plus side, though, the G.I. Joes would save valuable taxpayer dollars on bullets and missiles. Now, still on the inside, you have a little dial in the silver plastic, and also some other little details of hydraulics or gauges. And that's separate from the seat, which has sticker details for other gauging, including one of the stickers on the right side actually having almost like a sight picture for the character to look down on. But I would say that's not really an optimum place for that, because that's kind of where the operator's right arm is going to want to be. Now, if I'm running the Buzz Boar, I'm going to not want to have my right elbow jammed into my chest or belly the entire time I'm operating the unit. Be very uncomfortable. However, again, if I'm having a battle android trooper use the Buzz Boar, who cares? There is another decal on the left side, but it's kind of hard for me to describe it because it's kind of hard to see once it's stickered inside the Buzz Boar. This would also be, because of the location of this sticker, this is definitely one that you would put on the chair before you assemble it. Now, with a quick rundown through the blueprints, we get the number 1, the blade, the boar's teeth, in quotes, BOAR apostrophe S. I love the interchangeability of the hominin. Specially hardened, very pitch, digging teeth. This saw is essentially, again, an earth-moving device. Very interesting. So, the other thing, now, talking about this, I'm thinking of the South Park episode where Mr. Garrison develops the unicycle, where the guy rides inside of it like a motorcycle, not in a recumbent position like the Buzz Boar.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
All right. Anyway, back on topic. This has a constant viscosity pressurized roller system. Essentially, and when it's looking at the blueprints, it's basically talking about the track that the blade spins on. You have a forward hinging entry door. So that hinge is roughly where the Cobra symbol that snaps into place. Another commonly missing detail of the Buzz Boar. So just telling you that, hey, the door pivot's open. You have a single operator sealed cabin. Well, how is it sealed? You have vents on the side where you can barely see the character in. So it's not really sealed, it's louvered. Then we move on to the rearward facing vision vents. So the characters in the Buzz Boar and the vision vents are rearward facing. So how is the guy steering this? I would think that there's probably, let's say, a GoPro camera mounted to the side of this for him to look ahead. So why would you have rearward facing vents? Again, it's just a silly detail. I love pointing out these things. Now on the opposite side, you have the Pounder, in quotes, 50 caliber, dual repeating machine guns. Nothing wrong with that. And I like how the hose detail on that side feeds into the gun, is molded in the same dark gray as the rearward facing vents. And then you go to the layered composite aluminum alloy shell. Now, aluminum isn't exactly known for being bulletproof. Aluminum, a lot of guys would say, is a softer metal. It's light, it's easily formed and machined, and they do use it in tanks. I know Alcoa makes an 8-inch thick belly for one of the tanks. I can't remember which one, but I know it's one of the largest pieces of aluminum that's forged. But it's just kind of neat that they're calling it aluminum, and you do have that silver color. It's it's that metallic silver molded plastic. It's not chrome plated, but it's interesting that they call it aluminum. Just because if I was to do a device or if I was to manufacture a machine that is an earth mover, I don't equate strength with aluminum with earth moving. We're talking like steels, titanium. There's just other alloys out there that I think would be better suited. But it's nice that, hey kids, brush up on your metallurgy while you're playing with army toys. You never know. You might get into manufacturing or something like that. Then we have the DAO side-launched missiles. And I like DAO is for Destro Anti-Obstacle. So 1987, Destro hadn't yet reappeared in the G.I. Joe line. He'd reappear in 1988 for version 2 with the Despoiler. But for 1987, he hadn't been available since 1985. So you've had 2 years. He, ate 1983, 1984. Wasn't really a peg warmer. I never remember him on the pegs. But now they're referencing them. But they're referencing Destro, not Mars. So you can definitely tell this is like the start of, or keeping Destro in the lore for G.I. Joe. We have number 9, the flared support pods. These are essentially what you could consider the base of the Buzz Boar. It's what, when you have it on a shelf, keeps it from tipping over. And they're kind of hollow. So what does a support pod do? And, I guess it would say that's what's keeping it upright in battle. But more like it's what's keeping it upright on your shelf or on your carpet. We get back to the number 10 exhaust discharge ventilators. That's by the 50 caliber machine gun again. And that's those little, and those are cut out, and that's nice because when the door is closed, it gives it a dark, hollow feel, like an actual exhaust port or pipe. It's nice. So you extend the imagination away, but that's like the engine exhaust. You get the dust-proof cabin engine inhalators. That's that vent that I mentioned earlier that would be nice if, maybe if it was cut out. But by leaving it in, maybe you paint those grades black or a different color, something to provide contrast. And there you have your air filter for the operator of the Buzz Boar to breathe. Number 12, the laser-enhanced thermal night vision sensor. Again, this is on the same side as the 50 cal. And it's just like a little bump out. It doesn't really look like that on the toy. I'm not going to say that it isn't it, but that's what they're calling it. And again, this would be something where today in the modern era, you'd have almost something that looks like a little bit of a rear view mirror, but you call it the GoPro mount so you can see where you're going. And then finally, number 13 is, again, that hose detail behind the laser called the micro adjust gun control mechanism. So here's a value toy, again, where they put a lot of effort into the blueprints to sell you on the toy after you've bought it. Like, oh, geez, Mom, thank you for the Buzz Boar, in your sarcastic / I don't really want to disappoint my grandma who bought it for me, So you got this G.I. Joe toy. It's like I said, let's not beat around the bush. I love these value vehicles just because of how they really did put effort into every price point vehicle and trying to give you that perceived value for the dollar and how to inform, with this world building, how to take this toy that at one flag point, is roughly $3 to $5 ish about. Let's talk about it practically. Now, I tested this out with 3 figures, and like I said, the Buzz Boar really, in my play time or in my collector time, hasn't really gotten a lot of use, play, experimenting, really a lot of in-depth thought until that G.I. Joeberg video and them discussing it on their podcast. So I tried it out with a Cobra Viper, a Cobra Trooper from the Retro O-Ring line, and then because one of the criticisms is wide figures, I grabbed a Sonic Fighter's Major Blood. He's pretty wide, especially with his grenades on his upper arms. So here's what I found. The Buzz Boar is tight to get a character in. Now, the best way I found is to arrange the character into the seating position before you put him in. You flip the door open, but then what you got to do is hopefully you have a good O-ring, and by good I mean flexible. You're using a nice number 41, or maybe you have a nice loosey-goosey original O-ring, and you basically fold the figure in half. You tuck his foot in at the same time as his head, and then you slide his hips in. Because you can't do feet first, because you won't get his head in. You can't do head first, you won't get his feet in. So I found that was the easiest way to get him in. I found that the Cobra Trooper fits wonderfully. The Cobra Viper fits okay. He's not too wide, but he's still hefty. He's definitely heftier than a Cobra Trooper. But now we get to the wide guy, the guy with the big shoulders. Well, I wouldn't say big shoulders like New Skull, but he's wider. He's physically wider. So what I found with Major Blood, if you want your Sonic Fighters Major Blood to be piloting a Buzz Boar, is he kind of leans on his right side after you tuck him in because his arms are too wide for the door to close. I didn't find him particularly difficult to get in, especially after I figured out, you tuck him in and, slide his hips in. But then I just had to rotate the hips. So when the door's closed, you don't really notice because the door has those rearward facing vents, conceals enough of it where it's like, oh, okay, I know there's a figure in there. Again, that's why they showed the figure propping the door open on the box art, or marketing materials. Now, things to watch out for if you are in the market for a Buzz Boar. And I know for a lot of G.I. Joe collectors, this is right at the top. It is a grail. No, it's not. It's something that a lot of guys don't know how to play with, or they haven't really exercised that imagination or that imaginative part of their brain in a while. But that's cool. That's fine. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but we'll discuss that more later. But let's say you are in the market for a Buzz Boar for whatever reason. What are the things we got to look out for? Well, I can tell you this. The most common item missing is the Missals. The second most common item. Well, let's talk about why are the Missals missing. The Missals are missing most likely because they're held in by one of the fins is friction fit into one of two slots on the door side of the Buzz Boar. Now, I just bought a complete one, partly because I wanted to do this review, and that's scary enough as it is. But when I got the toy in the mail, I went, first things first, you put the Missals in, you put it together, you want to display it, you want to have fun, I want to experience it. Well, what I experienced was the Missals sticking in one slot and falling out of the other slot. So I can only assume with play, with rugged construction, the Missals eventually, something wears out, something stresses or chafes enough where the Missal is no longer a tight fit. So that's one thing to look out for, and it's probably the main thing that's going to be missing. Now, the other thing that is missing on a lot of Buzz Boars is the red Cobra emblem in that same bright red as the Missals that snaps into the flip-up door. I personally, on my one that I had at home, it had that in the door. So that makes it an excellent candidate for parting out to somebody that needs that logo because it also didn't have the Missals. Now, I don't know why, because I didn't experience why it is missing, but on my two Buzz Boars, it seems to be sturdily in there. It has two small clips that keep it in. I don't see it falling out unless you break those two clips. Now, the final thing that seems to fall off a Buzz Boar, and at least it did on the one that I had in my collection, and one of the main reasons why I needed to get one from Mercari was the 50 caliber machine guns. They sit on essentially where the chair peg is on the Buzz Boar, and it rotates around, but it doesn't clip in. It's a friction fit, and it allows it to rotate, but it also allows it to come off easily. So between the Missals, which I can obviously see missing, and the 50 caliber gun, which for me, like I said, I experienced this missing on mine. I think those are probably the two most common. But usually when these are up for sale and using eBay as a guide, they're usually missing the Missals and the Cobra logo on the door. So those seem to be the most common issues. But if you find one of these in Goodwill or at a tag sale or even a flea market, you know, you need to make sure that it has both missiles, the Cobra logo, and the 50 caliber machine gun. Now, using eBay as a guide for, you know, what could you expect to pay for one of these? You know, typically you're looking in the $20 to $30 range. This isn't exactly a must own for many collectors, and that's a personal choice. But, you know, at $20 to $30 is still a very reasonable toy to get complete and add it to your collection if you so desire. Now let me talk about how I would play with this. I really think, you know, what sparked the whole putting this into my consciousness is, again, that the G.I. Joe Renegades video by G.I. Joeberg, using this with the Cobra Bat. If this was manned by a Viper or a Cobra Trooper, I see this vehicle as a weapon of chaos, a weapon of destruction with a purpose. So if you're attacking G.I. Joe headquarters, you know, you're rolling these out alongst the frontline troops so that maybe the Buzz Boar is designed to cut into the walls of the G.I. Joe headquarters, or, you know, if it's a minefield, set off the mines. Maybe that aluminum structure will absorb some of the impact, so maybe your occupant wouldn't die. But that's what I see. This is I would assume a fast attack vehicle like a motorcycle, but it has some level of armor on it and it has some level of armament. You know, 50 caliber machine guns do a heavy amount of damage. You know, these are single barrel. They're not a Gatling gun, which would speed up the firing rate. And, you know, you're looking at the support pods on each side. That could be, especially on the side with the 50 caliber gun, or even on both sides, that could be where you store your ammo. This actually is working for me. This Buzz Boar is actually, for me, turning into a viable weapon for Cobra, and actually a little more realistic than it appears on the onset, of something that really fits in with the advanced tech of Mars Industries or Destro, and, you know, really can become a kind of formidable weapon for G.I. Joe to fight against. You know, you have the Buzz Boar blade spinning at, you know, at that side, you know, hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or 2,000 RPM, you know, barreling down on you. What would it do to the bullets? Would it deflect the bullets? Will it cut the bullets down? You know, does it provide some level of protection against direct assault? Obviously, the Buzz Boar doesn't really have much protection on the sides, so this would be susceptible from a flank attack. But, you know, on a direct assault, you know, this would be something that would be in the first wave of Cobra's attack against the G.I. Joe headquarters or some other opposing force that they would use. You know, this would be part of an invasion. So with that being said, you know, where would I place this in the collectability? And I would rate this on a scale of 0 to 5, specially hardened, very pitched digging teeth. The fact that, you know, upon review, I find more uses for it. I find it a little more realistic or not as fantastic as I first looked at it. Because, you know, when I first got my first one, it was like, I always said that I was going to dedicate a shelf to Dr. Mindbender's failed experiments. But this doesn't seem to be as failed as I initially thought. How many do I want in my collection? Complete? Well, it's small. It doesn't take up much room. And it's really hard to, you know, for me to only have one vehicle, it really has to be, for my collection, it either would have to be rare, large, or a stinker. But I don't think this is as much as a stinker as I initially thought going into this review. I would have to say this is a solid 3-tooth vehicle out of 5. It has its place. It would look cool attacking. It's part of a blitz assault. It's not going to hold up against like a flanking attack or another force that would be expecting it. But if, Cobra Commander or Serpentor wants to surprise the opposition, I mean, this thing's going to do it, and it's going to do some damage while doing it. Well, that concludes the 44th Missal for the masses of the Chaplain's Assistance Mortar Pod. I have been your host, Gary, and I hope I shed some new light on the Cobra Buzz Boar on your ears today. And if you would like more of the Chaplain's Assistance Mortar Pod, if this is your first time listening, you could always find me on social media at Chaplain Joe Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's all there. It's a great way to interact with the show. You could also, if you listen on Spotify, answer a poll or answer a question about the episode. I do read it. Interacting with your podcast player where you found this podcast only helps to grow and improve the podcast. You could also send an email at chaplainjoepod@gmail.com. I will be more than happy to read it and potentially even answer it on the show. Also, the Chaplain's Assistance Mortar Pod is the strange, but not estranged, nerdy little brother of The Pint, a pop culture podcast. And they make me say that because they say they have some unnatural weapons for the woodshop in my basement. Now, with all of that said and done, one final missile for the masses. Be decent to each other.